Stay out of the water and off the beach. High bacteria count closes some South Florida beaches again. What's causing it and what's being done to fix it?
That's why they do the impeachment crap, because they know they can't beat us fairly.
Feeling the love. The president leaves the D.C. fray to visit senior Florida voters who helped elect him and want to again.
Rick Scott is a wolf in sheep's clothing. His commitment to the Venezuelan people is totally disingenuous.
Attack mode. Democrat Debbie Wasserman Schultz tears into GOP Senator Rick Scott over a TPS for Venezuelans. We will take that to the roundtable. Good morning. So glad you could join us. I'm Michael Putney.
I'm Glenna Milberg. Again this week, signs of trouble in the waters vital to everyone in South Florida. And that is where we begin today.
And it is vital to our #1 industry, tourism. If tourists can't go to the beach and into the water, we've got a problem. It happens with depressing regularity, and it happened again this week in Miami-Dade. Icky water closed 5 famous beaches, the water contaminated by fecal matter and dirty runoff from streets and lawns. The health department issued a swimming advisory for beaches from Key Biscayne all the way up to Surfside, saying that coming into contact with the water there could make people sick. And in an upscale Fort Lauderdale neighborhood, there was another water pipe break, which prompted another boil water notice there.
In Miami-Dade, Kevin Linsky directs the county's massive water and sewer department, now working a decade-long $2 billion upgrade to the aging underground system. Jenny Staletovich is South Florida's top environmental reporter, now with WLRN Public Radio. This week, documenting the surge in beach water contamination during king tides. And it's so great to have you both with us today because we've been getting so many questions from people who really want to know what is going on.
Yeah, Jenny, welcome back. It's been a couple of years since you've joined us. Kevin Linsky, great to see you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Let's just sort of get it on the record. Water and Sewer Department in Miami-Dade, which is under this consent decree, has caused inadvertently some water pollution in the past with broken pipes like the one down there by Oleta River State Park. This time, however, you are not responsible. Is that right?
We are not responsible. We have any number of spills throughout the year. Believe it or not, there are between 50 and 100 every year, where it used to be 15 years ago between 100 and 200. But we've taken 19 years of data on beach closings, matched it to our spills. There is no pattern. Our system is fundamentally stable. We do have spills. It doesn't match these beach closings.
So let's talk about the beach closings, because it seems like, especially over the summer, we in the newsroom keep getting those alerts over and over and over and putting them out to the public. Jenny, you've been reporting on them extensively. This week there were 5 Miami-Dade beaches closed. Crandon, Virginia Key, Key Biscayne, Cape Florida, it's kind of the same general area, and Surfside. Is that all from the same cause, even though geographically they're on the other end of the county?
Well, there can be different causes. Inshore winds were pretty strong during the king tide and afterwards, so that could have trapped some water. Those inland bays, as you know, typically the water gets pretty steamy, and hotter water can make it.
So when we just heard from Kevin Linsky that it's not a broken pipe, it's not an outflow, it's nothing that the infrastructure or process is doing. So what is contaminating the waters?
Well, it's also increased stormwater runoff. When you have a king tide and you have flooded streets, you have a lot more water on the streets. That water goes someplace, it gets into the stormwater system, and it goes out into the bay.
So what's on the streets is going into the water?
What's on the streets, when you have king tides too, you get groundwater getting pushed up by that salt water that's coming inland, and as it comes up through the ground, I've been told by scientists, it picks up a lot of the stuff that's the contaminants that are in the ground.
Right, and then when you have rain, and we've had quite a bit of rain over the last several weeks or so, then you get the runoff from lawns, pesticides, and then you have dog waste, human waste. I mean, it all goes into the canals. Canals go into the bay.
Yeah, they're the highway system. They're the transmission system for all the flaws throughout the entire county.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the pipe breaks. We've seen, you're not responsible for Browards. I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you for that.
And we actually did invite the Broward Health Department here. No one was able to make it today. But But aside from the pipe breaks, water and sewer outflows go from the sewer system into the ocean.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How does that not contribute to contamination?
Yes, so this is interesting. The greatest investment this community ever made to save the bay was the ocean outfall program. People forget that. Back in the 50s and 60s, semi-raw sewage went straight into the bay. Whether you knew it or not, you were in sewage every day. So we got together with engineers came up with a system.
You weren't around in the 50s?
Nah, not quite yet. Where they treated the wastewater to an incredible standard, and I'm going to tell you about that standard in a moment. They found a place 3 miles into the ocean, right in the Gulf Stream, where that water is injected every day and it travels away from us. It does not ever come back to the bay.
Well, does someone else get the contamination?
So here's what the contamination is. At the point it exits the pipe, one particle out of every 30,000 is something other than water. It's almost entirely water. We've stripped all the nutrients, not all the nutrients, all the contamination out of it, and we've treated it with chlorine. I don't know if you want to believe this or not. We could take that full stream, take that ocean outfall, pour it on the South Beach, days on end, and it will not trigger a Department of Health test. That's how clean it is by the time it goes out the outfall.
But I've heard
That saved the bay.
environmentalists raise concerns.
I have too.
Yeah.
And is it
Right.
because it's too much fresh water going into the ocean? Is that a problem for reefs out there? I mean, I
So
have
this is
heard
an
that.
interesting, good question. So I've read all the reports
You
that
got
were done.
three reporters
yeah,
up here
sorry, I love this.
today, right?
I love it. So that legislation that wants to close the outfall was created in 2007, and it was based on a series of reports. If you read the reports, you never actually close the outfalls. And here's one of the things it said. It was very interesting. You could put scientists in a helicopter and you fly them around the outfalls and you drop them 900 meters apart, and you give them test tubes, and you say, is there an outfall or is there no outfall? 100% there is no outfall. By the time you get 900 meters away, it is statistical noise. And the reefs are not within 900 meters. The bay, it never comes back in the bay, and yet we're going to spend $2 billion closing what was the best investment ever for the bay.
$2 billion on your restructuring. I mean, let's go back 2014. Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer entered into a consent decree because federal government said your sewage, water and sewer system is aging, decaying. You must fix it.
Yeah.
There had been
They
a
were
lot
absolutely right.
Yeah. And
that's-
that is what you are in the process of doing.
So 2 programs, right? One, everyone in my department supports. One, frankly, nobody supports. The program that made sense was put together by the EPA, their scientists, the FDEP, and our department. And it said, our plants are not performing well, they aren't kept up. We're spending $2 billion to improve the plants.
Yeah.
The
Can I
other
just-
$2 billion.
can-
Sorry,
can
go
I,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me just interrupt to say, as somebody who has covered Miami-Dade County government for a long time, I remember those years back in the 80s and the 90s where water and sewer produced a lot of revenue, and our politicians dipped into that money, which was supposed to be repairing an aging system, and really did nothing to repair it.
Yeah, there's an investment pattern that's very distinct. If I were to run 30 years of investments in the department, it looks like a sine curve. When the EPA is not paying attention and suing us, no investment. When they sue us and we enter a consent decree, the investment shoots up. We're now in the shoot-up phase, but it is true, it's completely underfunded for decades.
Can I get back to the beach quality right now? Because I learned something this weekend. The state, Jenny, has this Florida Healthy Beaches program, and we actually did invite someone from the state as well to be with us, but they were unable. That is why the state has mandated testing every week for these beaches. But what they don't mandate is for the counties that find pollution or bacterial contamination to report it right away. In other words, there can be a follow-up testing a few days later, which is what happened this week. So on Monday, many more Dade and Broward beaches tested for contamination. We heard about it later in the week after the second round of testing when some of that had already gone away. Explain how is it possible that we could be swimming in contaminated waters before we even know that?
Well, you're right. In Miami-Dade County, they don't issue warnings until they do a follow-up test, and so that takes a few days. I think in Palm Beach County, they issue warnings as soon as they get the first test. There's no lag time. That's left up to the counties.
Yeah. Jenny, this week I heard an excellent report you did on WLRN where you interviewed Professor Henry Briceño, who is out at FIU, I guess famous. He's been testing water on Miami Beach and in the Bay for decades. What did he tell you?
So he has been found elevated levels near all the outfall pipes. So he's gone around, he famously tested the water after Miami Beach started their new sea rise pumps and found really high levels of fecal matter. He's been doing the same thing around the canals coming out of Miami. He's found it on both sides of the bay. And his concern, and what he's been saying this over and over again, is as sea rise continues to increase and we have more and more stormwater, pollution in the
More
bay
contamination.
is going to get worse, so we have to find a way to deal with it. The state now has a blue-green algae task force.
Right.
Stormwater is one of the issues that they're taking up and making recommendations on how to improve the treatment of stormwater. They want the state to deal with that.
And real quickly, I guess sea level rise plays into this infrastructure overhaul for the county also.
It does. So in all the consent decree programs at the 3 major wastewater treatment plants, we have modeled the following, which is 4 feet of sea level rise till 2070, and we aim a hurricane at every single plant, and then we design to that standard. So now we have, we're modeling 17 feet of stormwater surge, and all critical infrastructure is being placed above that level.
Well, we're glad
Plays
you're
in heavily.
Yeah.
looking over the horizon at what is to come.
Right.
All right. So Kevin Linsky, thank you for coming in. Jenny Stolatovich, great to see you as always.
And up next, the supervisor of elections in Broward, Pete Antonacci, is here. How secure is your vote? We're going to ask him. Stay tuned. Welcome back. 2020 campaign season is well underway, and so is a scramble to protect your vote from foreign hacking or just plain glitches in the process.
Both those things marred last year's elections in Florida, resulting in changes, especially changes in Broward County voting processes, starting with the replacement of the county's election supervisor, Brenda Snipes. She was replaced by the man you see here, Pete Antonacci. He was appointed by Governor Rick Scott, who asked him to take over that department. Now you've been running it, Mr. Antonacci, for how long have you been?
10 months.
10 months.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We're glad you're here. So
Thank
I
you
guess
for inviting me.
you're quite welcome. The key question really is, how confident can voters in your county be that when they vote in 2020, next year, that their vote is going to be easy to cast and will be counted accurately?
In ways large and small, what I try to do as I go around the county and meet with various groups and individuals is to try to instill that confidence. The big issue, of course, is the national news that we hear about from time to time about the vulnerability of systems, IT systems, to intruders. And of course, the scariest intruders are the ones overseas that we don't know and don't see.
Right. A big headline in the New York Times, other media this week, saying that Iran tried to hack into a presidential campaign last year. It appears to have been President Trump's campaign. They say they didn't get in. I think Glenna was just going to ask you about hacking into Florida's system, because we know there were reports that at least one county in Florida had its system hacked in 2016.
It was not Broward, so I can assure you that. Not to say that we haven't been a target in the past, we probably have been. I think it's important to recognize what has happened in the hacking world. And there are 2 things that are important in our business. One is the tabulation system. In other words, taking in the votes and counting them and reporting the results accurately. The other is the voter registration system. Those systems are separate systems. And in our county, we go to great lengths to make sure that the tabulation system is in no way connected with the internet. So when we're counting votes, we are completely disconnected from the rest of the world. So that process, I'm very confident in.
You know, it's very interesting that you said that, because when all of this started bubbling up to the surface, right around the time that you were sworn in at the end of last year, people were saying, oh, yeah, we're going to have our tabulation system is going to be very safe and the hacking can only be done beforehand. But that, as we've seen on social media, that kind of disinformation apparatus can really sway voters and, in fact, sway the campaign. So my question to you, because you had said publicly about a month and a half ago that you were very concerned about the Florida election infrastructure that would be susceptible to some sophisticated foreign hacking.
Right.
So what have you done in the issues that had bubbled up in Broward? What kind of wholesale changes have you made in the last six months?
Well, not
or
to
so?
back off the statement, I was asked what amounted to a hypothetical question, and recognizing that we're little old Broward County here, and there's some big actors out there, the Chinese and the Russians.
Yeah.
We're little peas by comparison to them. And if
Yeah,
they
well,
want,
you've got more than 1 million voters. That's hardly.
that's a lot to protect.
Yeah.
And we're darn serious about it and make sure that it's going to happen. So what have we done?
What have you done?
And there are probably 3 things that we've done that are very important. Firstly is we've taken every effort with every piece of software that we can buy that has been approved by our governments, meaning both state and federal. And we have purchased and deployed that software to be an early warning system. So we know, as many systems do, we know when somebody's trying to penetrate. And that's the most important thing, so that you have a warning.
How?
Something
How does
is going
that-
to, it's
how?
done with some software, and you're talking to the wrong guy about that. Maybe you can talk to your own IT gang out here. But the system is in place where people are blocked, and they're blocked with notice. So there's a warning system, and the system works actually pretty good with screens in our IT department. There are people that are not allowed in as a general matter, but it's notice that is the most important. The other thing we've done is to take additional steps to make sure that our tabulation room is really sanctified and inoculated against
4-foot concrete walls.
against the internet. Oh, we have systems that are designed to make sure that no one can physically get in, and that of course no one can electronically penetrate our tabulation system. And the third thing we've done is a fair amount of training with our staff to make sure that some of the obvious things don't happen when you get something on your
Obvious things like.
don't open an attachment when you don't know what it is, that kind of thing. And we stay on top of people pretty well to make sure that they do the common sense things.
That was the issue, if I remember correctly, in Broward. Yeah, that's how the penetration began. In
unsuccessfully,
the first
but it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
That was the methodology
Yeah.
for penetration.
Yeah,
Right.
Mr. Antonacci, let me pay you a compliment, if I may. One of the things that kind of irritated me over the years when both Miriam Oliphant and Brenda Snipes were the election supervisors in Broward was their names were plastered over trucks, over buildings. I mean, you just couldn't escape it even if you wanted to. So congratulations, you have not put your name up all over the place, and that is kind of good. Now, the other question I would ask is that you have worked for both Democrats and Republicans in government. You served as director of the South Florida Water Management District, which is an apolitical position, presumably. But you are, I think you're a registered Republican, aren't you? So
I am.
How are you doing in Broward County, the most Democratic county in the state of Florida?
Well, I occasionally speak at Democratic clubs because I want people who are interested in politics to know about our systems.
You used to be a Democrat.
In a previous time, in another life.
Just throwing that out there.
I've had several other lives in the past. I think I've been pretty well received. You can't help but be needled in a jocular kind of way.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of that, and that's all good-natured in the spirit of partisanship, and it's been okay. The county commission, our county commission now, which is 9 Democratic members, have been forthcoming and generous in their appropriations to make sure that Broward County citizens are served.
And I mean, what they demand, what the people of Broward County demand, is competent administration and integrity in the voting system, and you seem to be achieving that.
Thank you. We do one thing. We do elections. And we should be able to do it well.
Real quickly, you said you have said you're a caretaker. You don't plan to run in 2020.
That's true.
See, if you did, maybe you'd want your name out on bus benches and
It
things
is,
like that.
it is a temptation for people in public life. When you have the
Yeah.
ability to do it, people take advantage of it, and it's not just Broward County.
Yeah, of
We,
course. Pete,
we understand. Pete
thanks so much for
Antonacci,
being here.
great
We'll
to have-
we'll be in contact for the
We'll
next
have you
year
back.
really well, won't we?
close to the election.
If you need me,
For sure.
I'm here.
All
Thanks
right,
so much.
up next, we're going to take all the week's hot topics, and there were so many, to the roundtable.
Thank you.
It was, as you know, another topsy-turvy week in the news, an absolute avalanche of events that was often, I found, confounding, confusing. So let's try to stop and make some sense of it all with the roundtable.
Or try to, anyway. And we've got a great roundtable for you this morning. Introductions are in order first. Anthony Mann is the Sun Sentinel's political reporter, busy guy these days. Nancy Ankrum is the editor of the editorial page of the Miami Herald. Mark Caputo reports for Politico and is covering the 2020 presidential race with a special emphasis on Florida. The original Florida man, right there.
We're-
I don't know if that's a compliment.
I'll take it as one.
It's said with love.
We're so
Hi.
glad you all are here. Mark Caputo, let me begin with Thursday. The president, as we all know, as the world knows, said, China, why don't you investigate the Bidens? And we will get to the substance of whether that may or may not be another count of the articles of impeachment. But first, I want to ask you about the reaction from Florida's two senators. Because Rick Scott has said essentially, I don't see any crime. What crime did he commit? Marco Rubio, on the other hand, kind of gave another answer, and we ought to listen to it before we get your reaction. Here's what Marco Rubio said Friday down in Marathon.
I don't know, but that's a real request, or him just needling the press, knowing that you guys were going to get outraged by it. He's pretty good at getting everybody fired up, and he's been doing that for a while. And the media responded right on task.
All right, so
Silly news media reporting what the president says.
yeah, shocked. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I think the only joke here is that Marco Rubio expects us to take his analysis seriously. CNN, in fact, had reported, I believe in June, that President Trump privately raised the issue with China's President Xi Jinping.
And they took it seriously.
And they also took it seriously.
Yes. Right.
And they said, no, we're not going to do it. So everyone thinks the president is serious except for Marco Rubio, and it's a joke, and he's turning into some sort of referendum on the news media. Understand this. Why would he do that? And he's being destroyed on social media over this, Rubio is.
Right, he's taking a lot of heat.
Rubio in 2016 ran against Donald Trump for president and got crushed in 66 of 67 counties in Florida. Rubio has one major weakness politically, and that's his right flank. So the more he kind of sucks up to Trump, and there's a twofer here, bashes the news media, the better it is for him politically.
Well, how in a national sense, I mean, especially this weekend, you have Senator Romney, Utah. This morning, Senator Collins from Maine, Republicans are coming out and saying this was not appropriate. They're taking a risk. Nancy,
They're taking a risk, but it's time someone took that risk. It's a shame that it's a risk to actually question this president's actions simply because you belong to his party.
So what are they doing that Florida senators won't?
They are deciding that maybe being a sycophant isn't the best way to go. And we did call Senator Rubio a sycophant in an editorial a few months ago because we are that disappointed with his willingness to look just like that in order to, one, support this president, but two, boost his own career.
Yeah, Tony, man, let me just ask you, Marco Rubio, to put it in a little context, has suffered a lot of humiliation over the last 3 years or so. To gain President Trump's ear on Cuba and Venezuela, and he really is driving U.S. policy in those two countries more than anybody else. And so, I mean, to say anything critical of Trump, he is afraid would cost him whatever influence he's got in that foreign policy sphere.
And we see how President Trump reacts when anyone tosses any mild criticism in his direction. And Marco Rubio is not going to get in the path of that for the reasons that Mark said, what happened in the 2016 primary. And really, Rubio has been for quite a few years now regarded as somewhat of a heretic on the right. If you go back to his role in immigration reform. He does not need to get crosswise with the base, and he certainly doesn't want to incur the wrath of the president.
And that's an important part, because despite what senators do or don't say, there is a Republican base that really does think that this is a witch hunt, and that's a very significant thing for these people to consider.
I think it bears pointing out on this show and others that where this probably will go for the Mitt Romneys of the world who say it's inappropriate is, in the end, it's not clearly a crime for the president to do this. Now, Democrats are saying, hey, it's a crime because it would help your election and therefore it'd be an in-kind contribution or a contribution that would exceed these various limits. That's kind of a strange reading of the statute on campaign finance. And the reason I know that is the Mueller report specifically declined to prosecute Donald Trump Jr. in part, or charge him, because it's unclear about what value you get from a foreign entity providing dirt on your opponents.
Can I just
But
bring
that's a
up
legal analysis, and it's a political question, really. How,
Very good point.
How the public ends up reacting to this.
Can I just bring up, I remember prior to the November election, in one of the debates that the now President Trump had with Hillary Clinton, he looked into the camera and invited Russia to find the 3,000 emails that Hillary Clinton was hiding.
30,000.
30,000, thank you. I'm not really good with numbers. So that's kind of the same thing. He was asking for a foreign power to get involved with his opponent. This is not new.
Blatantly, right. It's not new.
Right.
Well,
and
he
he
told
did
George
that out at
Stephanopoulos
the
that he would-
Doral, Trump National Doral, in July of 2016. Russia, if you're listening, find the 30,000 Hillary Clinton emails, and we all know now that that day, the Russian intelligence agency began to try to hack and get into the DNC server.
And he
like,
told
"Hey,
George
great idea,
Stephanopoulos he
right?"
would
Right.
welcome such help again.
Right.
Yeah, you know, we just should also note for the record, and Tony, you and I were among the reporters at that event in Weston on Thursday, where Nancy Pelosi, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, Donna Shalala, and 30 Venezuelans, talk about that in a minute, but all of those Democrats are firmly behind Pelosi and saying, yes, this is really a serious impeachment matter, and we want to go ahead with the inquiry. But if you speak with them privately, I mean, you hear, yeah, it looks like we're going to impeach the president.
One of the interesting things about that is they're firmly behind it now, but with the exception of Mucarsel-Powell, even these South Florida Democrats in very safe seats for re-election, they were very late coming to the we're on the impeachment inquiry bandwagon.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think another point is that Trump is doing in Venezuela what exiles want, and taking a tough stance there. We don't know the degree to which it's moving the needle, what's happening in terms of the back channels, but he has been strong on Venezuela, yes, because of Rubio.
Yeah, and 200,000 Venezuelans live mainly in the state of Florida and South Florida, and many of them have become citizens, can vote, so it's an important
Let's
cohort.
take a break, and we will get into exactly that when we come right back.
Welcome back to the Roundtable, a good one with Mark Caputo from Political, Nancy Ankrum from the Miami Herald, Tony Mann from the Sun Sentinel. And Nancy, I think your point, as we broke before, is a good one. When President Trump spoke at FIU, I think last February, and spoke to a largely Venezuelan exile crowd, said everything that they wanted to hear, but what has he done since for them?
Exactly. And the question is, has he basically abandoned Venezuela? I think that he did not realize that, Maduro's in for the long haul.
Right.
Guaido seems to be out of options. And as Mark said, short of military intervention, which is not going to happen, especially leading up to 2020, what is there to do?
Right. Well, stalemate is where we are.
Yeah.
Tony Mann, let's go back to that meeting where Nancy Pelosi and the other members of Congress spoke, and one of the things that came up, obviously, was going to be TPS for Venezuelans. They do not enjoy TPS, and these Democrats are advocates for it. Rick Scott is an advocate for TPS for Venezuelans. But Debbie Wasserman Schultz tore into Rick Scott. I want to play the soundbite of Debbie Wasserman Schultz speaking on Thursday.
Rick Scott is a wolf in sheep's clothing. His commitment to the Venezuelan people is totally disingenuous.
Well, that's pretty tough. You normally do not hear a member of Congress from one state that publicly denounce. Well, Mark is shaking his head.
I mean, it is not rare for Debbie Wasserman Schultz to brickbat Rick Scott.
Yeah.
And for him to give it back to her.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
And he
He
did.
then pointed out, you got negged as the DNC chair.
Right.
That's what it devolved. And incidentally, that was a response to my question.
Yes,
and
it
if anyone
was.
was being disingenuous there, it was actually Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Because my question was, if TPS is so important, how come Democratic Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey blocked Rick Scott's temporary protective status bill that would have helped Venezuelans? It also would have changed the program reform temporary protective status to make it temporary. Right. And the Democrats don't really want to do that, and that's the heart of it.
Okay,
and she was denying the Democrats really were doing that.
Let's talk about that. Temporary protective status is temporary.
Well, what was interesting is Nancy Pelosi gave what I think is a novel definition.
Temporarily temporary.
She gave a novel definition of what temporary protective status is. She said temporary protective status is not temporarily temporary. It means temporary for the country from which you hail, not the United States where you're in. So therefore, apparently, the immigrants who came to the United States after Hurricane Mitch ruined Central America in 1998 still should be under temporary protective status, according to Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Yes, apparently.
And that's one of the reasons TPS is unpopular with a lot of conservatives and with many people in the leadership roles in the Trump administration, and they have not been especially liking the idea of giving TPS to any groups or continuing it.
In South Florida, where there are a lot of people who live with TPS for more than a decade, here's sort of the issue. You have people from countries that are not livable under the certain set of standards, which is why you get TPS. So Haiti, Hurricane Mitch was hurricane devastation, and so TPS is renewed while those countries are still unlivable. And if you have someone from those countries who put down roots as it's being renewed for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, they've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got homes, and then you say, it's up and you've got to go back. That's,
you have mixed
what's
status
the
families.
fix for that?
And I don't know what that fix is, because wholesale taking people and putting them back in a place where they have.
Welcome back to the Roundtable. The president was in Florida this week, the first appearance of the first order of business in Florida since the impeachment inquiry. Tony Mann, it was not supposed to be a rally. It was a piece of business. The president signed a Medicare executive order, but boy, did it feel like a rally. He got the love in the villages, a kind of a Disney-esque. It felt like Disney for adults. That's what my first time there. What do you make of what we're going to see when the president starts his slow roll?
Starts.
Good point.
It was really a campaign rally the way all of his official rallies have become, and you know, he has a lot of supporters in that part of the state, and nothing seems to be able to dislodge that support.
Yeah, you know, Nancy, there seems to be an irony here that's almost unspoken. Here are a group, what, 120,000 white people, fairly well-to-do, all of whom generally 70 or older in that cohort. I know because I'm in that cohort. Who get Social Security and Medicare and despise socialism and support Donald Trump. How do we put all that together?
We put all that together by, I think that these people believe, and they're not wrong, I deserve this. I paid into this. This is not a gimme. This is not a freebie. I am getting back what I put in.
Well, the executive order, really there has not been a ton of reporting on what is inside that executive order. The headline, if there is one, is that the president seems to really be putting a lot of attention and infrastructure around the Medicare Advantage, which is the component of Medicare that includes private insurance. Most of the people that we spoke to while we were in the villages did have Medicare through a Medicare Advantage plan. Mark, it's a complicated process. Is that seen as favorable, not favorable? Where do you see that going?
What do you mean, like favorable to his core audience?
Favorable to the state of health care in America when seniors go on Medicare. The Advantage plans and straight up Medicare, if you start to really look at it, the costs are not that different to the consumer. It does involve insurance companies, though, that are making money.
It does, and this is part and parcel of President Trump's dismantling of Obamacare. Obamacare was funded in part by trimming future increases for Medicare Advantage. Now those are starting to go away, so no surprise there. I think to Michael's point, the villages and Naples, Collier County were two bulwarks for President Trump's support. We are seeing in our voting patterns, the white vote is starting to consolidate more toward Republicans, increasingly, just like the non-white vote is for Democrats. This is, as was said about Willie Sutton, or he said, "Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is."
Where the money
Why
is.
does President Trump go to the villages? That's where the voters are.
Yeah, I would point out that initially the White House, Glenna, you were there, but they said the executive order he was signing was going to be called Protecting Medicare from Socialist Destruction.
Yeah, they backed off on that.
Keep the government out of my Medicare. Right?
But really, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's his way of being able to say, well, the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren Medicare for all people are going to mess up your Medicare, even though it's actually President Trump's budget proposals that have proposed cuts in Medicare spending.
Now that you have said the word Bernie Sanders, it's a nice segue to say, you know, is he still a viable candidate? I mean, very sorry on a personal level that he had a heart attack, 78 years old, and you know, he's going to take a few days off.
I think that a lot of people are willing to ignore the age thing when we look at Biden, when they look at Bernie Sanders. This is going to nail just why there's some real reluctance to get behind a Bernie Sanders or a Joe Biden.
He's back on the trail today.
He might be back on the trail, but Bernie Sanders' campaign, at least in the polls, was starting to collapse, and I just can't see how this is helpful. Incidentally, I think Frederica Wilson, the congresswoman from Miami, recently took a shot at Biden and just said he essentially doesn't have the vigor.
She's a Kamala Harris supporter.
She's a Kamala Harris supporter. But for a sitting member of Congress to actually say of former Vice President Joe Biden, I don't think he's got the stamina to cross the finish line. It's pretty remarkable.
Well, October 15th in Westerville, Ohio, wherever Westerville is, 12 Democrats are going to be.
It's in Ohio.
No, I knew it was in Ohio.
Another clown car debate we get to face.
Well, when the little car arrives and they all get out, we'll see what they say. All right, thank you all. Great to have you come in on this Sunday.
Always.
Thank you.
And still to come, to report or not to report, one of the decisions we face in news when it comes to anonymous threats. What would you decide to do? That's next. This is a live look now from tower cams across South Florida.
Looks pretty good out there, and here is Weather Authority meteorologist Brandon Orr with our official Sunday forecast.
Yeah, guys, it's not too bad of a day. There's some sunshine out there, a few clouds in between, maybe a sprinkle or two today. Wind gusts are going to be up to around 25 miles per hour, so a little bit on the breezy side, 88 degrees, and that 30% chance of rain, which goes up overnight. You can see a few of those showers trying to move in off the Atlantic. So just a heads up, you may hear some heavy rain at times overnight tonight. Otherwise, this afternoon, a stray shower or two. Then the moisture really picks up. Check out the tropical moisture on the way. 1 to 3 inches of rain certainly possible when you add up all this rain from Tuesday, Wednesday into Thursday. That's when we'll see kind of the heaviest move through. So our high temperatures will be into the upper 80s. And guys, this is what I'm looking forward to. A cold front, some lower humidity, temperatures around 86 degrees, and a low chance of rain that's headed our way next weekend.
Oh, yes. Brandon, thanks. All right, a little behind-the-scenes news process for you to consider today. Early this week, we were at a middle school in southwest Miami-Dade where a stream of parents were signing their kids out early, scared by and weary of another school threat posted on social media. I went back in our files to see how many of those we've covered just this year and eventually stopped counting. Threats to shoot up, to blow up, to kill. Some come with photos of weapons, real or doctored up. I Googled school social media threat. Hundreds came up from around the country, all covered in broadcast, covered in print, and digital news sources. In the case this week, 2 8th graders were arrested for threats, and they told police that it was a joke. They're charged with felonies now. Some news outlets identified them. We are not because of their age and to keep from adding to their notoriety. Even a little local fame is dangerous fuel on social media. We've seen in the aftermath of many mass shootings how killers intentionally followed in the footsteps of those who came before. There was once an unspoken rule in news generally to not broadcast bomb threats for just that reason, inadvertently demonstrating to sick people looking for attention exactly how to get it. Social media's easy access and unlimited audience has amplified that concern now, and it's made school threats more common than ever in the history of education. But what if we didn't report the threats? Don't parents and people involved want to know? Do you count on administrators to inform the school community? And if a trusted news source chose not to report, would you flip channels to those that do? As we learned in a devastating way from the hindsight history of the Douglas High killer, no threat should go untracked or unchecked by law enforcement and by journalists. The question becomes, do they need to make the news? What do you think? Let us know. Also, you can catch any of our shows on local10.com, and we appreciate you being here.
And remember, as always, stay informed, get involved.
Also, subscribe to our This Week in South Florida podcast. Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Director is here with us this week. You can hear that if you log on, and stay tuned for SoFlo Health, which is right here